problem. It's all fixed. Well, good morning, and thank you for taking some time, and as well as just the whole confusion of trying to put two services together. And I'm just grateful that you're willing to invest the time, and I hope we'll make this worthwhile. I don't really want to spend more than an hour, so just trying to give you a time frame if you're feeling antsy. If we need to go longer, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to wear everybody out. So just a few things. The church is open. We're not going anywhere. And I love this quote. I quoted in a sermon a few weeks ago. We have been entrusted with the ministry of reconciliation, not a ministry of conflict management. I just think that's brilliant. And it's a reminder of who we are. I was just asking Elizabeth how she felt. She's normally an eight o'clock person, and what was that like to be with people she had no idea who they are? And the same for 10 o'clock, being with people not having any idea who they are. It does create a kind of angst in us. She didn't exhibit that, but for me, there's a kind of angst in that because I kind of like to know the lay of the land. I like to know what I'm walking into. And so I get that. And at the same time, we talk a good game, don't we, about church growth and about getting to know one another, but it's not easy. It takes time. It just takes time. And then you add illness and aging and death into the mix. So with the death of Roy Gilly last week, and then Jennifer Smith, who's Marilyn's daughter-in-law, there's several of us are carrying around a lot of grief, just personal, interpersonal grief. And so we have to be aware of that, don't we, in each other. And then someone met me outside this morning and said, oh, yeah, I just learned I need to have these expensive repairs on my house, and my car is like also needing attention. And it just kind of went on. And so we're all carrying stuff. And I think the letter I wrote you this past week said, there's a lot going on. There's no getting around it. There's a lot going on. And so I hope that we take times for ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to just be in silence, to go outside and stand in the sunshine, to read scripture, whatever you find helpful. But it's so important for us to be grounded because we live under the tyranny of the urgent, don't we? We've always got, there's more to do. We got to take care of this. Or we live under this weird political situation where there's got to be winners and losers, and we want to make sure the losers know they're losers. And it just goes on and on. We live in a very tense time. And so that's all in the background of our heads. And you throw in war in the Middle East. I mean, we go on and on. Anyway, I think one of the great tragedies of our day is that churches are often a place of great conflict. They've kind of forgotten the ministry of reconciliation. And part of that is because we're all kind of playing out these cultural images we have of scarcity. There ain't enough to go around, or we're fearful about what's going to happen, or we want revenge. You list all those things. And so as we kind of play out those cultural dramas in churches, we can find that churches themselves can lose their way and not understand our primary goal is to be a place of wholeness, of healing in a very conflicted world we live in. And we just add to the pain, don't we? We just kind of keep heaping pain upon pain, and that whole angst that we feel to humanity's suffering. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do about that? Are we going to pick up the gauntlet and be a place of reconciliation, to be a place of collaboration, to be a place where we are sensitive to one another's needs. And for Anne's comments about learning from her son is kind of a way to deepen her faith. And seeing this community reach out and just let kids be kids is so huge. And that's a big cultural shift for St. Thomas Camden, because I remember it when I was a kid and it was not friendly to kids at all. So there was well, anyway, the point of all that is we need to listen for those voices. When we think about conflict, so I don't think we are as in deep conflict like we were maybe a year or so ago. There's a sense, at least from our previous meeting, the sense I had was things have kind of settled, sorted themselves out. No doubt we carry around hurts and feeling like we were cut out of a discussion or conversation or weren't heard in the way we wanted to be heard. And so we've almost kind of got to start back from the beginning and kind of walk our way carefully ahead, because there's no rush. The kingdom is not going to come because or in spite of us. It's going to come in spite of us. And so this whole idea of managing conflict, it's really nonsensical, isn't it? Why would we want to manage conflict? That's like saying that the church is in the business of sin management, right? And that Jesus came to give us less death. Jesus came to give us life. And so we really need to define the problem from the perspective of what's our desired outcome? Where does our heart's desire live? And the problem is not that there's too much conflict. Conflict can be a great growth edge. The problem is always there's just too little collaboration. Because what happens when there's conflict, we go into our silos. We go in, find the people that sound like us, and then we work each other up. So how is it we begin to risk and be a little more daring in terms of listening to the other? I know with some groups here, I've done a Bible study in which, I think we did an annual meeting last year where you partnered with somebody and that you could only report back what the partner told you. That's an exercise. That's a skill in terms of just learning to listen closely instead of being ready to come up with the right answer. So it's something that comes with practice. Anyway, long story short, we today what I want to do is bring everybody up to speed, because we've got people in our midst who have no idea what we're talking about in what the needs are around the tower out here. I just want to compliment us that we are paying attention to some long overdue repairs on our property. And so I'm so happy that we're kind of getting on top of that other stuff. It's almost like we needed to do that before we could even begin to entertain anything about the tower. So doing the plaster work out here, replacing the boards and whatnot, that's a huge undertaking. If the envelope of the actual church is not together, God knows what expenses you're going to run into down the road. So you've just like your house, you've got to keep a roof on it. You've got to make sure the sewer line works. You got to, all of those things. And they're not sexy things, right? They're not the things that we go, wow, oh yeah, let's put on a new roof, or let's put in a new set of bathrooms. It's like, oh yeah, that really does need to be done just for us to be able to function as a community. So let's just go ahead and we'll kind of do a survey here. So many of you know, we're here for the celebration of the centennial of the building of the church in 1924. And you notice at that time there was no tower. So that was a later addition.
I'm on now.
And there's the rectory, which is now the offices on the lower floor, and we rent the upper floor to a tenant. We have a single person who lives on the upper floor.
Without the Wi-Fi.
And because it is a non-employee of the church, it's not a clergy person, we pay taxes on that. So that's all part of the rent and whatnot. Anyway, just so you understand how our campus works. And the beautiful thing that happened back in the early part of the 2000s was this kind of uniting these two, melding these buildings together. So the parish house was here, and this is kind of where everything ended. And then this beautiful Chris Glass designed this extension way out here, the sunroom, and redid the bottom floor of the rectory. So I did a funeral for someone a few weeks ago, and she remembers playing with one of the rector's daughters, and she says, "Oh, we're in the dining room," and "Oh, where is the whatever?" Yeah. So as you can tell, over the years, we make changes as we think best. And so I know one of the stories that Jan Dolkater tells me when I go visit him is we had children in the basement for Sunday school, and by golly, we needed to have classrooms. And so the church responded by doing all of this.
Can you hear it?
Just a tremendous gift for us. So let's go on the next slide. And there is the tower. So again, I just snapped this off the web, but just so you know what the structure looks like unveiled. And so you can kind of, so there's the edge of the chapel roof there. All right, let's just move on. So in the spring of 2019, building envelope specialists assessed the condition of the church building, and they concluded that the bell tower had significantly deteriorating, posing a risk of failure, safety, and/or property damage. The slate roof, so the slate roof over the whole church has outlived its useful life. Generally, when you put a slate roof on something, they may make it 100, they could make it 125 years, but we are on now the side of borrowed time. The bell tower is right here. It's wrapped. So this is a current photograph. And they provided other recommendations that were less urgent. All right, let's just keep moving through this. In September of 19, there's a whole assessment taken, full assessment engineering drawings for the bell tower restoration. The deterioration was much greater than expected, so they went up, inspected everything, looked over the mortar, the joints, everything. Essentially, the upper third of the tower will have to be completely dismantled and rebuilt. And due to the 1.3 million proposed budget, as well as consideration of other lower cost alternatives, it was agreed to wrap the tower to stabilize the structure and provide additional time to assess. Now, one of the things that was happening was there was water coming in and leaking on a portion of the organ pipes. So you don't see these pipes, but they are up in underneath the tower. And so that caused a whole third of the organ not to be used because of the water intrusion. So let's go to the next page. In 21, local architect Chuck Campbell assisted the, how do you say this, Capital Projects Group, assess the following bell tower remediation alternatives to stone tower reconstruction, was using original building materials, new stone tower, stone veneer, that is, and CMU block. What is CMU? Is that cement?
It might go the other way.
Cinder blocks. Okay, thank you. Tower removal with new hip roof over the Lady Chapel. So in other words, to take the tower down and use this roof line to go into the roof line of the church. And so those were the proposals that they were put out at the time, and the estimates range from 900, I can't read big numbers, $930,000 to 480,000. So call it $500,000 to $1 million. And just given the price of materials and labor increases since all this was done, so that's 5 years ago, I don't think you would be hard pressed to up those 50%, but let's say 20 to 30%. Campbell and Cordia also provided estimates to replace the church roof. Asphalt shingle roof is a 20-year useful life. A standing seam metal roof is 50 years worth. A faux slate composite roof, you've seen some of those roofs that are made of fake slates. Those are good for 50 years. And then the good old slate roof, 100 years. Cost estimates range from 140,000 to 270,000. Let's move so the Building and Grounds Committee and the vestry are these were all slides that were presented a few years back. They were proposing the following course of action for the remediation of the bell tower and the slate roof. Remove the tower and then put on a new hip roof for $500,000 to use asphalt shingles for 20 years for 135,000, some change. So approximately 620,000. And I think that got up into the 700,000s. Okay, we'll go to the next page. So the recommendation was based on, for the removal of the tower with the new hip roof, the history of architectural and maintenance challenges with the existing bell tower. So the curious thing is this tower has been a pain since it was built. There are vestry notes and correspondence between the rector in 1945 complaining about what are we going to do to fix this tower. And vestries being what vestries are, kick the can down the road, right? we just keep on kicking it. So we are really at a crisis point where something needs to be done. The propensity for freeze-thaw damage to the existing bell tower and stonework. So again, these are arguments for removing the tower. The lower ongoing maintenance cost as a result of improved rainwater and snow shedding by having a pitched roof. And it also reduces the amount of stonework always being, with acid rain and whatnot, just keep working on the mortar and that sort of thing. And they felt it was the most fiscally responsible choice given the limited resources of St. Thomas. And the asphalt shingle roof was recommended based on these items, advancements in solar. So the idea was people were talking apparently about putting solar panels on the roof. And they're saying that, well, when they look better aesthetically, so let's just put a cheap roof on now, cover things for 20 years. And in 20 years, wow, we can't imagine what solar panels are going to look like. So is that a fair conversation that was had? The southern roof exposure represents, so that's the southern roof is facing Wood Street, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about the southern roof, that's the Wood Street side, represents a substantial surface to generate solar energy. And sure, you look up when you're over in the parking lot there. That's a significant chunk of property there in terms of roof. Using the lowest cost alternative, best position St. Thomas take advantage of solar energy alternatives as the costs and aesthetics become optimal. So those were some thoughts back then. And the next steps, a plan in 2023. So this was sort of how we were going to knock this off. The parish considers alternative. So this, again, this obviously being presented in 22. parish considers alternatives and approves the final selection. Did that happen? Was there a parish meeting about that? A sort of meeting. Okay. So that says something, doesn't it, right there? The final architectural engineering drawings were pretty much done up, right? Edmund, we pretty much have final drawings. The contractor and subcontractor bids attained. Did we have more than one contractor apply? So again, this is some of the stuff that you were facing a few years ago. We were all just coming out of COVID, and you couldn't find anyone to drive a nail into your roof. It's most ridiculous situation we were in. And so we had a contractor come up, building permits filed. Did we do all the filing?
Yes.
Okay. And we are also in a historic district. If you notice at the beginning of Chestnut Street, well, and then coming in the other end of Chestnut Street, you'll see signs that say you're entering the historic Chestnut Street district. A capital campaign. So you recall the report from Evergreen that basically said, it's a great idea, but it's not going to happen. And so you need to take some time and prioritize what is your mission? Who are you? What are your priorities? And the disposition or relocation of the bell, Caroline. So I'll tell you a funny story. So I was at St. Thomas Whitemarsh, which has their own staff person who is the carillioner. And they would have summer concerts on the lawn and stuff. But they were on 40 acres of property. Most of it was a cemetery. Anyway, so I've had lots of experience with carillons. I have mixed feelings about them. I love the Peter Wimsey novel, Dorothy Sayers. You know that one of now if it's escaped memory, but Lord Peter Wimsey and the Nine Tailors. So ringing the bells. Great murder mystery. Anyway, I digress. Building permits were attained. Construction contracts were executed. Construction targeted for the fall. So it's going to commence in September of 23. So that's what we finally ended up with. So here's what I believe. At the heart of the universe is a heart of love that embraces us and accepts us unconditionally. This heart of love is the source of our existence and life. And this loving heart created us for a purpose and has given us every resource we need to fulfill that purpose. Now, I wish I were an expert on leading this kind of conversation, so bear with me. But I wonder, I've got a few possibilities here, but I wonder. Well, that's going to be our final one. We'll come back to that. What's our core value at St. Thomas? And I'm going to go quickly around the room. You can pass, but just let's play pass the mic. So if you have something to say, if someone asked you, what is our core value? What's the one thing? So a word, humility, or we'll come to you, Donovan, just a minute. So think about if you were to tell someone, how are we different than the Kiwanis or the Lions Club or the Chamber of Commerce? What sets us apart? What makes us different What's our core? So let's just get some feedback. Go ahead.
Love of God.
We are a family.
Our love of each other.
Love. Faith.
Church family. God's people. Being all together.
Cohesion.
Pride and faith in the church I grew up in.
Love. That's loud.
Camaraderie. Service.
Love.
Love. Did you guys get it? Acceptance. Fellowship.
Faith, community.
Dedication of members.
Family. Service.
Family.
Enduring peace.
Worship. Love.
Community. Community of love. Faith in God.
Peace.
Community.
Loving kindness.
Ritual. Worship. Hope. Hope. Open hearts.
Community. Love. Fellowship. Everything.
To love Christ Jesus and love each other as he loved us.
Rebecca, Rebecca on Zoom says devotion.
Great. Yes, and welcome to people who are joining us on Zoom. We're so grateful for your participation in this. And so when we are thinking about repairing buildings, how is it that we can keep these core values in front of us? You know, as a reminder, the buildings are always a means to these core, to point to these core values. And so I guess I'm curious about how does the tower help us achieve those core values? So tower or it could be just the chapel, it could be the, there's really two plans, aren't there? There's two plans. One is to take the tower down and just have the chapel. The other is to restore the tower as it appeared in 1935. And maybe we'll come back to this, but so as you know, things kind of went off the rails when there became a clearer distinction between the preservationists, so the ones who wanted it to be back as it was, and those who were looking for something that was not going to encumber the future, that was more economical and achievable and didn't feel like as high a stretch. And, we're probably talking, well, at least $500,000 difference between the two plans and probably more. So, I mean, so I really believe you can do whatever you want. I know you've got the money. It's in your pockets, but you've got the money. And I know, and then there is also this kind of this thinking we can augment things. So let me just kind of play out a few things. Going with a full restoration. How would we fund that? First of all, if that's your will, if there is a consensus about that, there are other sources. In fact, isn't there a referendum on our ballot this fall about the state having monies set aside for restoring of historic buildings? Pardon me? Yeah, no, I know there's lots of other funds, but I was just commenting of like, oh, even the state is involved in helping out nonprofits, right? And again, I don't know what the restrictions may or may not be, but so there are some funds that could help in that, but by golly, we've really got to raise the lion's share within our walls. So if you talk to people, talk to people at the Baptist church, some people say one of the narratives is, oh, they had all, outside people sort of came in line and help put that up because it was important to the whole community. And yes, I think we will have a lot of community support no matter what we do. Partly because if you know anything about family history, where you kind of go way back and you sort of see how people have related. What happened in 1924 when they built the church, when Father Hayden was here, he also made sure the library was built. He was on the school board. I mean, St. Thomas was the place. We were the leaders in terms of civic pride and duty, and we were involved in our community in a way that I don't see us quite as gripping now. But that's our heritage. That's a big thing that comes through the lines. Where was I going with this? So anyway, Nancy Barbet. Yes. So I've spoke to Nancy Barbet. I called her up and talked with her. She's an Episcopalian, goes to St. Luke's in Portland. And she is a historic preservationist. And she's adamantly on this. Yes. Yes. Yeah. She's an architect. So I said, well, I got this meeting coming up, and if people like start gouging my eyes out or something, she said, oh, well, I've got people I lined up that could come help with management, with conflict management. I thought, well, we'll see if we need that. And I talked with our Evergreen. I talked with Diane, and she's so lovely, so helpful. And I said, so, what are some markers we need to kind of say when we're ready to do something? And basically we both agreed, well, we just need to agree what we want to do. And so one of the things Nancy had said, so this is a historic preservation architect. She says, well, if you put the tower back, ideally you need to have a thorough inspection and kind of go repoint and everything. You need to keep it up. In other words, you can't just wait for the next vestry to take care of it, because we know what happens. And so if you go that route, and this is why the proposal went in the direction of taking the top part down, so that there would be less surface area and future vestries would not have to deal with that every 20 years. So I think that's an important consideration to kind of keep in mind of like, how are we gonna actually make sure, we're just going to put something up and hope it stays up for another 100 years. So there's all of that. And what was the other thing I wanted to just mention? I've just talked with lots of different people. Oh, I know. So the bells. So the bells. I'm the only person that I know that owns a CD of 12 different congregations in England of their church bells. of change ringing. And somebody said, oh, the tower, I remember the bells ringing at my wedding. And so there's emotion tied up with the tower too. It's a lot of big memories. And then another person said, oh, well, they've already sold the bells. The bells have not moved. They're still up there. If anyone wants to go check them out, I'll help you with the ladder. I'll hold it and you can go look. So again, we kind of tell ourselves stories and we kind of get into that us and them. And I think we need to think about what's our core value. What do we really want to accomplish in whatever we do? But we have to do something. We can't just keep leaving it. And I probably talked enough. I've got lots of little notes here, but I'm just going to pass this around and you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm just going to leave it free for all for a little bit. If it gets, just remember, be respectful and use I felt like, or I feel this way, or don't start saying that Jacqueline caused me to, or, I don't want to see any finger waving or blaming. This is not a blame session. We're back in that business about reconciliation. So just kind of think about that. Think about the core value that you called out and think about how the tower can help us get there. Okay. Does that make sense? It's a lot, but yeah. Well, as I say, I'm no expert on this, but if you want to give it a stab, you want to give it a stab?
My main concern with this project, and I was on the building committee for the last one, I just want to make sure that this time round that we look at all of the options and that the parish is very much involved. We are a family and a family of love. So let's include everybody in the discussion and in the decision.
Jacqueline has no bearing on this comment. I was on the building committee through an awful lot of the beginning stages of all of this, and I've had the opportunity to climb up and down and in and out and over and around. And first of all, I can assure you that the bells can't go anywhere until you take the whole top of the tower off, which hasn't happened. It's for me, I'd love to see the tower stay, but the reality of the situation is that there are an awful lot of maintenance and ongoing maintenance and issues that need to be dealt with if that tower stays, not the least of which has been mentioned, the design of everything to shed snow. Otherwise, we're going to keep having the same problem no matter what we do with the tower. But I think we need to have lots of conversations between each other where we sit down with not angered tones and not it has to be this way, and hear everybody out on a one-on-one basis so that we all understand where we're all coming from and then come to a consensus. Because I have the feeling that in a lot of ways there are things that some people don't completely understand about the tower and what has to happen, but all of those need to be ironed out before we bring it to a huge forum to talk about. We all need to have our fingers into it so that when we come to it, it's a final decision and a decision amongst all of us with full understanding of what needs to happen. Thank you.
Now it's Jacqueline's turn.
Picking on me today, thank you. I would just like to say ditto to what was just said before, everyone.
The tower needs more conversation, I think, as to what needs to be done. And we need better understanding about what's happening.
Thank you for coming.
I'd almost, I'd almost just like to simply see a show of hands. Wouldn't be weighted. It wouldn't, just to see how many people abstain, how many people would like to see the tower rebuilt, how many would like to see it rebuilt at a lower, snow shed. I think we have a lot of information. I think it's been going on for a long time, and it's almost like we could get a consensus right here. It's hard to get everyone together.
As one of the oldest members of this church, I was married here. I was not brought up in this church, but I love this church. My husband was a member of this church, and so I eventually became a member myself. And this church means a lot to me. Since 1952 is when we first started going together. So my word is law, I wish. In my mind, the core of the church is the sanctuary. And that is what I would want to protect most of all. We could get along without the tower, without the bells. The bells could be separate if needed be, but the core, as I say, the core of the church is what must be protected. And I can see from past experiences that it's an expensive church to maintain, and always will be, as long as we try to keep it up. I would like to see it, the core of it, maintained, whatever is necessary, and given the best attention. I'm going to pass.
I think that the thing that concerns me the most about it just sitting there without attention is the continued deterioration of the masonry. There's a structural problem in that it's got lime masonry in between, lime mortar in between the blocks that you see. Behind those blocks is a thing called rubble masonry, which is randomly shaped stones that are embedded in the mortar. Again, a lime mortar. It was repointed on the outside at one point with waterproof Portland cement. At the same time, water has been getting into that mortar, trickling down through. You have seen peeling walls in the arch by the chapel and in the chapel. And that's an indication there is water in that rubble masonry, and it leaches out lime. And when you have that kind of a problem, I worry very much about how long those stones will still stay there without falling unless something is done soon. Whatever approach we take, that passage about maintenance is extremely important. Every 10 to 20 years at the outside, the masonry is supposed to be repointed with lime mortar, not the waterproof stuff that holds water in the wall. So one of the solid considerations of what has to happen. And I worry that somebody may be hurt if this doesn't stay.
Really? I was on the vestry when that conversation started. So to me, it's like, geez, oh man, can we get on with this? I look around and I know what Pat is saying. Why do you have a church? I mean, do we have a church for the building, or do we have a church for the people? And when I see all the people that I know sitting around here, and I respect them all, I worry that we're getting sidetracked on a building. Somebody not too recently said to me, do you have enough in your life? And most of my life I've had enough. I might not have had that extra that you'd like to buy the Cadillac instead of the Toyota, but it served me well all of this time and my family well. And when this conversation started concerning the tower, I remember saying to several people who have moved away since then, what can we afford? I mean, really, basically, running a church is like running your house. Yes, you might want that beautiful rug or that lovely living room set, but can you actually afford it? And I guess that's where I am. When I hear all of this, I think if you have to have extra money every 10 years to fix it, are you going to have that discretionary income? Or will you have to close the church and lose the people? And for me, that's the most important thing. Do I think it would be hard to do without the tower? Sure. It wouldn't be fun to watch any of that. And we've all gone through this in our own life. But in the end, you have to say, what do I value? And that's where I am. What do we value here? So.
I love the sound of the bells. I live like a block from here. But I think we have to live within our means. And I was raised by parents who grew up in the Depression and went to a Presbyterian school, and really believe we have to live within our means.
No.
You know about those Presbyterians?
I would love to see some small groups meeting. Somebody mentioned that, I think already, to understand all the aspects of this problem, to see what our options are, to hear from other churches that have perhaps gone through something like this, like St. John's in Bangor, to find out how they dealt with their tower, which actually they've come out of that crisis and have dealt with their tower in a good way. So I would like to know who their historic preservation architect was. I'd like to know, how we could have such an architect, whoever it might be.
I'm one of those people who's kind of newer, so I wasn't really part of all the discussions earlier. So I appreciate people going over it again and maybe again. I really enjoy learning about the history of the church as well as getting to know the current people in the church. So for me, history is just interesting, and to me, it's continuity. And I would love to have a tour of the building, and I'd love tours to be given to people to explain what is going on, and that will clarify the steps forward. If we had small groups of tours, people who knew about exactly in detail, like people who are on the committee explaining what's been happening and the different possibilities that could be done. And then that would, I think, make it easier for people to discuss and decide it.
I think it's our duty to be fiscally responsible and not pass any problems on down to future generations.
I've been with the church since 1970, and I witnessed a lot of improvements. I'm deeply concerned that whatever we do, the structure remains tight and feasibly maintained. My concern is we have a wonderful organ. I mean, we really do. We have an exceptional organ. It was to rebuild would cost a fortune. And I'd hate to see that compromised. And also the chapel has beautiful woodwork as well as the main church. And that's very valuable to me to see those images preserved properly. Thank you.
I think it's important that we face our Goliath together as a team and go forward prayerfully.
I've been sitting here thinking of everything that everyone said, and I agree with most of it. I think it's aesthetics and tradition. And is it feasible that we complete this tower and, as they say, in generations to come, are they going to be as diligent as we are right now? And if they're not going to, we can't think about what somebody else will do, but we have to think about what's going on right now. And so is it aesthetically important, or is it not, obviously? But the church is the people. It's not the tower. Yet we like to stay with tradition.
My comments are similar to those of Rosalie. And I don't think the church has taken advantage of experts in this area. And an architect really needs to know about older churches, older construction, and so forth. We need to be talking to masonry contractors. We need to talk about to other people who have done the same type of thing. And I really don't think that we've taken advantage of that to give you all of the alternatives have to do with either taking down or reconstructing, whatever. I just don't think we've done enough to look at the alternatives for the next steps.
Bill, I apologize for what I'm going to say. The experts that we had up front, which was building envelope specialists, were the premier restoration engineers in the state. They did the work at St. Luke's Cathedral in Portland. The challenge was that because of the way they did it, and they were restoration architects, every single block was numbered, and every block came down and went back the way it went back. And in doing that, because that's what they did on the east elevation, that's why the difference in cost between $1.3 million to restore it versus what Cordic came up with at 700,000 was to take it down and then use new stone to do it. So that the restoration work that was to be done would cost even that much more. And when we asked others about that on the restoration side, they said, 1.3 is a big number, but I think it's going to be a multiple of that. And what that multiple would be, I'm not going to guess. The other pieces to build on what had been said by others, the sanctuary, one of the beautiful pieces of the sanctuary is the stained glass windows. There's $250,000 of restoration work that needs to be done in the next 5 to 10 years, or those windows will basically implode, will fall in because of the way the lead is expanding. So I very much appreciate all of the positions that have been said, and I do agree we need to talk about it some more. But I ask that we recognize that there was substantially good work done before, and that we don't discount that good work that was done. Who else?
I know there's an orthodoxy that says that the experience in the church is more important than the church building, and I accept that. Having said that, seems to me that almost a century ago, some big thinkers thought that they could enhance the experience in the church by putting in the tower. It's become iconic. And I guess I always considered myself to be a big thinker. I think if you really want something and you really drive to it, you can get there, you can achieve it. I think there is the wherewithal and the resources in the town, whether it's inside the church, outside the church community or not, to rebuild that tower and make this church the great church that it should be to house the experience. So count me as a preservationist. I never thought of myself that way, but count me as a preservationist, but also count me as someone who has no anger at all about whatever the decision is.
Well, I guess I would agree with his last comment there, and I just have, I too would probably lean to that side. My question is, or my comment is, was anything done to find out about possible grants? And then the other thing is that knowing that there's going to be required maintenance every 10 to 15, 20 years, it would behoove us to set up some kind of an endowment fund so that that would fund that and it wouldn't be a scramble every 10 to 20 years to take care of that.
Oh, I just don't know what to say. And I'm always so full of words. First of all, what concerned me when they said you have to repoint everything in 10 or 20 years. So does that mean the whole east wall that we have just restored for much money, is that wall going to have to be repointed again? Is there nothing?
Certainly should be part of your regular meeting. So they check it. Doesn't mean they're doing the whole thing. It just means they're checking the seams and some will have to be dug out.
Right, right.
It's just the way it is.
My other thought is, I don't think we have reached out to see where the money could come from. I think I know several donors that would give quite a bit of an amount of money to restore it. I also would like to have a really historical person. The historical architect said that she thought some things could be done, but not having been able to look at it in the way that was hopeful. That's all that she could say. I know the church in Bangor had different builders, different people working on it, and it came in far less. I don't know if it was shoddy work. I hope not. The other thing is we have beautiful bells and we'll have to either sell them or put something modern in the yard too. And those bells rang every single Sunday and weddings and other times. And the carillon played at different times of the day and it rang out over the entire town. And people stopped and listened and it was beautiful. And it just, to me, it was part of Camden. But my biggest thing, if we have to take it down, we have to take it down. But I don't think we've tried hard enough to see if there's money to restore it.
I was not a part of any of this discussion like this. Okay. I wasn't present for this, but the little that I know, I am a preservationist. And I do feel, rightly or wrongly, this is what I feel in my heart, that if I am in a church where I feel God's presence around me, I get a better experience. I feel closer to God. It does something to my soul. I don't get that feeling in modern churches, rightly or wrongly. I just don't. And having spent so many years in Charleston, where preservation is huge, in fact, it's, some would say, out of control. And hearing the Westminster chimes every quarter hour, you know, and being around that before Charleston had all that Manhattan money come in and make it completely over the top the way it is now. We loved our churches, our Episcopal churches. They were shabby sometimes,
but they still stand from the 1700s, some of them. I respect that. And that, as well as the community, which was precious to me when I moved here. This church reminded me of those close to God feelings that I had in Charleston. I would love to explore more other people who have been through this and how they got it done. I think it's just too important to do anything right now.
I kind of feel I don't really know that I have an actual opinion between the two choices. However, I feel like the most important thing is that everybody is, or a large majority is behind whatever route is chosen, just because otherwise you're going to have a hard time paying for it. I saw the picture that you started out with. Tower's not there. I think it's, it wasn't there originally, so it's not really part of the original church. So I think it sounds like a maintenance nightmare. And I think we need to just make sure we do something that everybody's behind and realizes that it's going to take everybody's participation to pay for it.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I support the consensus, what everybody decides. It would be lovely to have the tower restored. But if the finances aren't there to support it, then I guess we'll come up with some type of solution that works.
I'm from Old English Episcopalian Church. And I'm also a conservationist and a preservative type of person. And I feel that in this community, if indeed it's decided to continue with the church, and I think the bells are very important part of this community, I think that we definitely should reach out for grants and monies because I feel that it's probably there if we look for it. Thank you for being here, and I have a lot of faith in this church and love this church, and I'm happy to be back here. Thank you.
Wow. A lot of thoughts here. When I was younger, I restored Warren Baptist Church. I also restored St. George. I've worked on Littlefield and a lot of other churches. A lot of folks here know I'm a contractor. There's a lot involved. And I think you've discovered a cause here, and you also, Ed, in that seems like anytime you restore anything, you have to pay attention to the period it was built in. They're finding not only in other churches, but we've seen it here, where you dig into a certain type of structure, it's better to repair it rather than do something new. However, it's going to be costly. It's going to be real costly. And I'll support anything. I feel the possibilities are very broad here. But it's going to be a lot of.
I think I agree with what George has to say. So I won't say much, but I do think it's one of the prettiest churches in Camden. And I do remember hearing the bells from Curtis Avenue.
I'm wondering if we couldn't have a third option rather than just the two. I remember, and Elizabeth might be able to back me up on this, but I thought that this tower was
was made too high because there was a rector here who wanted to change the plans of the original tower, which was supposed to be much lower. Is that the opposite? Okay. Okay, we're supposed to be higher. Okay. What I would like to see at this point is to go back to a historic architect and talk to them possibly about keeping the base and some of the footprint of the tower that we have and not use, look and see if there is a third option, because this option of getting rid of it's one thing, keeping it is another thing. It has its problems and everything, but is there a third option out there?
Second option, still there.
Okay. Well, the drawing that I had seen originally did not have the squareness to it. It almost looked like a beehive. So maybe there's something that I'm not aware of. Yeah, footprint. Okay.
The problem I've had, and it was in the comments you made, not being critical, from my perspective, there were never two plans. There was one plan, and we were told we were going to take it down. There were a number of us at that meeting who said, well, wait a minute, even if it's going to maybe be too expensive, we would like to spend some money and get an expert in here to tell us what it will cost. It never happened. I have no clue. I mean, I've restored 200-plus-year-old buildings. I know what it takes, and I know what the ongoing expenses are. And I have no clue, really, what we're talking about. I think we need a full report from an expert, a historical architect, and let's look at the number. And then question number 2 is, okay, what would we like to see if money was not an object? If people want to try to restore it, then let's find out if we can raise the money. We are going to have to go to outside sources, but I don't think that was ever really explored because, and I'm sorry, Carlos, if I wasn't listening, there was one plan. We asked to see a second plan in full detail, and we never saw it. Finally, I'd like an accounting to tell me, are there still invoices not paid or monies paid for the work that's been done up to this point? I don't even know how much we have right now sitting before any additional contributions would be raised. And I hear things, but I really kind of like to know. And so those are my comments. Not trying to be disruptive. I've been in a lot of situations where I got 2 opposing parties and I just don't have enough information. And I think a lot of us don't have it.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah.
It includes multiple alternatives shared with Patch for over 2 years. I've been on the website and we made everybody look aware of it. They have copies of that. It's not fair to say that now we all can do better jobs of communicating. We can all do it. But it is really not fair to all the people in the room that did the work to say that we didn't try or we didn't do it right. There are experts in there who will show all the different multiple choices and plans that were presented. And so I don't, for the benefit of those who work with me, I'm less concerned about me. I'm concerned about us. It was an active process, and I ask you to read the 200 pages or 150 pages of work that was put together on that.
When we asked to have a second, there was a meeting that followed that big congregational meeting. And it was a way.
So that would be your experience. We'll come back to that. Yes, let's just wrap this up.
Yeah, so I was on the vestry back then. And with a small hiatus in the middle, I'm on the vestry now. And if I think back to what we were talking about earlier, I really believe in my heart that the most loving thing we can do for this community is not to kick the can down the road anymore. We can talk all we like about a capital campaign and raising money from left, right, and center, but we can't do that until we are decided on what we're going to do. And we are here now today because the Evergreen report quite astutely picked up on the fact that we are a divided community on the subject. And so the capital campaign, the fundraising came to a halt at that point in July, August of last year. We still have to ask ourselves whether if we rebuild the tower, if we have all the money in the world, will that solve our problem? And I think if you look at this report, which was produced in hard copies and placed at the back of the church a few weeks ago, you will see that there's all the detail about all the problems. I was amazed that some of these copies were still sitting back there, considering there's so many people who want the information. I am actually quite familiar with it, the 154 pages. But I wanted a hard copy because I usually look at it on my phone. And I urge you, as Carlos did, if you need a hard copy, I think we need to produce more. I think so. This second meeting, I think our first meeting was more about finding out where everyone is at. And today's meeting, I feel, is more about, do you have the information you need? And it sounds to me like we still don't. And so it is hard work to read all this. It was a lot of work that went into it. So, and there are a few drawings in here of different possibilities. And yes, another architect was spoken to, and that was the Nancy Barber, or whatever we're calling her, Nancy Barber. She gave her opinion. So that's, oh, one other thing. It's a very small one. The church that Phil and I got married in England burnt to the ground a few years ago. It was burnt by a 16-year-old arsonist. It has been rebuilt. It's not exactly the same, but they used part of the charred remains on the altar and to make a cross.
Well, and we have been doing that, right? We've been looking after the envelope, the exterior envelope. And as you may have noticed in the tidings or whatever, the plaster guy is using the exact same method they used in 1924. So it's like, okay, all right. So, all right, well, here's how I'd like to end things, because we've gone on longer, but I think it was important for everybody to just kind of have our say. And I think what I would like you to do, if you feel you need more information, specific information, what is it you need? And then, so send me an email, send it, or text me, or write me a letter, however you communicate. And let me take a look at that, and then sit down with whoever and we'll figure out how to get that information to you. All right. Does that sound fair? This feels like that's the next step. The other next step, I'm going to encourage the vestry to look at a rewrap of the tower, because that has way overextended its life. And remember, that was the reason we kind of pushed ahead with this, because the wrap was running out on its lifespan. And so again, it didn't give time for either people to get to weigh in or people to ask those questions for very specific information. So, yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, it definitely has. Yeah, and as everybody told me growing up here in Maine, central Maine, is when they built the high school, it was like, don't build anything with a flat roof in Maine, right? That thing leaked like a sieve. Sorry, were you going to ask? What's that?
Grants. A grant. So the other thing about raising money is if you want to look into grants, you also have to know what kind of grant you want, whether you are rebuilding, whether you're rehabilitating the building, or you're building something new. So we can't, I mean, you can look online and you find about a list of 30 to 50 possibilities. And there is a steeple fund, but ours is not a steeple. So
again, the bulk of this money has to come from our pockets. We cannot depend on outside sources. And I need to investigate a little bit more of the story of the Baptist church, but at least somebody told me that things became very divided once the outside money came in. So I don't know what that meant, but we all have narratives. Okay, yeah.
If the bells are actually removed and, a separate structure created, will they be operable or are they just going to be sculptured?
I assumed, I should never assume anything. That's a great question. But my assumption is those would still be alive Caroline. But, right. And you can't, yeah. Yep. Yeah, we understand that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is great. Okay.
Three options. Oh, my voice is loud enough. Okay. We were offered three options about the tower, different taking down options, different looks to the options, but never an option to try to keep it up. And I think that's what Jim meant. There were no options, and there were three options.
I thought one of the options was to restore it as is. Yeah, according to the building. Okay, so we will just make sure we trot that stuff out again. Again, just think back to the circumstances. We were coming out of COVID. There was conflict around church leadership. There was conflict around politics within the church. And then the tower was yet another divisive issue. And I think because we reflect all religious institutions, so whether you're a Christian church or a mosque or a synagogue, we are all facing dwindling numbers in terms of organized spirituality. So, right, we live in the age in which there's tremendous distrust of any institution. And when we ourselves are divided about who spent the money, it's like, how do we create that transparency is so important to rebuild trust. Sorry, was there someone back here?
When we're talking about looking for information, I think there's a group of us who actually need like a full pullback, sort of like what you did here today, made available. So not just what went out to an informed church that understood that there was an issue, but what even came before that. So more like this slideshow that we had today, if that's something that could maybe be made available in a meeting for new parishioners.
I've tried my best to put as much as possible on the website. And there is a bell tower webpage that has all the information, has the 158 page, has the last 2 or 3 parish meetings we've had on it. If people are interested, that may be the first place for you to look at, because it does have the different parish meetings and everything else. And there's also a question, there's a ask questions about the tower. And you could send that out, and we could get it out that way. But that may be the first place for people at least to look to see where your questions are and what information we have and what information we're missing. Because whatever you want put on the website, I try my best to get as much as I can on it. That's just.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, sorry, did you have something?
I have some things in the archives about the tower in the early stages, and some of the stuff I'll give to Terry to post on the website, okay?
There is so much wrapped up in this, and I thank you for your time. So now our job is twofold. One is let's funnel through me to start out. What information do you need so that we can begin to clarify some of that stuff? What are the questions you have? And the second is I'm going to be urging our vestry to appropriate funds to rewrap the tower or to do something just to check to make sure things are okay out there. So hopefully it won't demand a whole deal, but anyway, and I just thank you for your time here. I think that it's really outstanding in terms of you giving this time and your candor. You've been very vulnerable and kind of laying it out there where you are. And I suspect, I can't remember who it was, it Rosalie? There's someone kind of back here about doing smaller meetings. So we may, wintertime's a great time for people to maybe host dinners for 6 or 8 in their home and have conversations around all of this as well. Okay, so I know this is burdensome to some, it's frustrating to some because it's like, I already know this stuff, but we've all got to be kind of moving in the same direction. And so thank you. Meister Eckhart said, if you can pray any prayer, this is it. Thank you. That's the prayer for us. I hope you have a great day. Don't forget to shoot me those emails. Communicate.